Hello and welcome to the Nothing is Wrong with You book podcast. We're thrilled to have you here with us today. And as always, we talk about books that are out in the world that, people are just loving or raving about, and we're not quite sure about them or wondering if it's just us, but it's not us. Everybody approaches books in different ways. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, as well as recommending and sharing the books that we're currently reading or have just finished reading. So we're going to start with you, Athena. What books are you reading right now, or what have you just finished reading that you want to share out?
Sure. I just finished, this is an Oprah book club, The Tell by Amy Griffin. It's
Cool.
a really interesting memoir. I thought, I really enjoyed it. It's tough to read, about buried trauma that comes up much later in life that you don't realize is there. It's just amazing what the body will hold and not let go of until you're ready. So that was great. And then I finally got to read and finish the new Charlotte McConaughey, The Wild Dark Shore, because I'm a huge fan. And this was beautiful. I love her books though, but this was one of my favorites. Some people call her stuff climate fiction, but it was really beautiful. So those are my two.
Okay.
Yeah.
How
What about you,
Colleen?
Colleen?
Yeah.
Well, I first want to report that since I've been reading this for so long that I did finally finish My Friends by Hisham Matar, and I really think it was great. It just took me long because of my own life, but it was a book I could put down and come back to again, but I'm really, really glad I read it. I'm kind of in that weird in-between space. I've finished a bunch of things all at the same time. So, the other book that I already passed on within a day, I was late to the party, but I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I had no idea everyone else in the world had already read until I posted a picture of me reading it. And I'm really, really, really glad I read it.
It's good.
Oh, are you one of the only other people that never read it?
No, I haven't read any of. I haven't read any of her stuff.
Well, I didn't even realize she was the person that had written Atmosphere that this summer is all a buzz about. And one of my students was like, "You really need to read this, Dr. Lynn." So I bought it, and I did. I kind of kicked off summer reading with it, and it was great. Athena, it's a really great read. So
okay, I'll read that.
Else, and I just want to say very quickly, I love how many people are reading Greta and Valdine because of us. Like, I've seen several people I know kind of like posting and being like, we read this. So like, if anything came out of this podcast is that people read that book, I'm super happy. So those two I just wrapped up, and I'm in the middle. Well, not even in the middle, but from the person who wrote the postcard, I've been reading Gabrielle. So I saw that and I bought it, and I'm in the midst.
Are you enjoying it, or?
Yeah, so far it's not the postcard, but I like it.
Yeah. Thanks. Rebecca, what about you?
So yeah, I have a bunch on my on my pile right now, and I kind of switching in between. I have two that I'm still picking up and reading from my trip to Aotearoa, and one is The Forgotten Coast by Richard Shaw. I bought a lot of books when I was there, so I'm slowly going through all of those. And this one I bought then, and I just started again, is the Memoir the Mermaid Chronicles. I'm trying to go that it's a memoir, but it's about mermaids because it's a mer-moir.
A midlife mer-moir.
Yeah, by Megan Dunn. I read her other book, Things I Learned in Art School, and so when I saw that this was out when I was in Aotearoa, I definitely picked it up because I really liked her other book. So
cool.
And then I am also reading the new Ocean Vuong, The Emperor of Gladness. This is all over the world right now, it feels like, because of thanks to Oprah. But we've talked about Ocean Vuong on the podcast before, and just my love of his writing and his ability to bring beauty to language. I think we'll be talking about that in a future podcast as well. And then in general, I started this when I was in Aotearoa and we've talked about poetry in this podcast before, but something about just reading a poem a day, right? Like just going into that space. So a new contemporary poets of Pennsylvania, Keystone Poetry, that I picked up and
Yay.
am reading through. So
We could do
connecting
a
back to
whole
my
episode on that.
hometown and my roots through that each day. So those are the books that I have not finished any of those. They are definitely currently being read. So
The Keystone has a lot of people we know in it too, and it's going to be like, I think, just a nice companion to have alongside of us. And someday we should talk about Commonweal and how that started, what that started for
Commonwealth.
Rebecca and I. Commonwealth? Was it called Commonwealth?
Yeah.
Well, that's 20 years ago. So.
It was a long time ago.
Anyway, yeah, there's collections about Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Really inspiring. So I'm excited. Some people I really care about and admire in that. So I'm excited. Mine is sitting downstairs somewhere. Can't wait to dig in. So shout out for that collection and the people that we know that are in it.
Yeah. As always, I think we all love things that are rooted in place. And so it's really nice to get those moments. Yeah. So we're doing something a little different today. And who knows, it might spill into another podcast because I think it's a huge topic to even be addressing. But we, at one point in our conversations, were talking about the canon, and the books within the canon, and the fact that there even is a canon. I think, Colleen, it might be helpful to just kind of give the overview of what do we mean when we say the canon. I wonder if you can tackle that for us.
I can. First of all, I just want to, this is the CANON, not the CANNON, which if you play the spelling bee on the New York Times puzzles is really handy because there's two spellings. So we're talking about the two N's instead of three N's canon. So the canon is the books that academia basically has decided are the books. So maybe like the classics people would talk about, or really, and what we want to talk about today is the books that people are expected to read, because we want to think about also who's doing that expecting and who has decided that those are the books that are the classics. And very quickly, when we start to talk about them, we realize it's mostly men. It's mostly white men. It is deeply rooted in the United States, not even the Americas, and in Great Britain, and that's about it. So it's very small in sense of geography, in sense of gender, in sense of racial experience. And so what a lot of good work has been done in academia is to really start to push against the idea that there are certain books that people should read. Now, I am an academic with a degree in English, so of course there is an expectation that I am going to have at least read or experienced or knowledge of these books. So there is some importance to it. There's a versatility to that. However, my whole career has been like, well, who's been left out? What voices aren't being heard? Why does that matter? And so when I, for example, start a class on like women world writers, I start with, okay, like write down all the books you were assigned written by a woman. And the list is short. And then I'm like, all right, now anybody who's not in the United States, I'm not saying the Americas, right? Like just the United States and England, basically. And then that list gets even shorter. And we talk about like, why does that It matters because there's a whole world. So Chimamanda Adichie talks about that as a woman living in, as a young woman living in Nigeria, reading books that had nothing to do with her experience, her writing about weather, like people talking about how nice the weather was. And she was like, the weather was always nice. Like this kind of nothing was reflecting her experience. So the canon is great. I mean, there's so much good stuff there. But if the purpose of this conversation is to think about why does it matter when people decide what matters and doesn't? And what does that do to us as experience as readers? For example, people are always apologetic to me about what they read as if I care. I'm like, I just want you to read and be happy. So I think there's like some shame that also is connected to, oh, well, this isn't a classic or this isn't literature with a capital L. So I want us to be just really aware of, sure, as an academic exercise, there is some value to a certain set of books that we want students to know, but also there's a downside to that, which is who's not being heard from, especially in a time when people, I think, from my 30 years of teaching, people are reading less and less. I don't want them to not have their precious reading time being used with something that they dislike. So the canon, I mean, if I missed something, let me know, but it's just something that I know we all, with our reading habits, push against.
Mm-hmm.
And right, like indigeneity is not really valued in the canon. In fact, texts that are about like undoing indigeneity and colonizing are of value.
They're highlighted, right? That's like like how
Yes.
the West was won, kind of, right?
Yes.
Like,
Like, oh, I've read a book about India, E.M. Forster. And I'm like, no. So yes, you've read that book. So I'm really interested in books that people have had experience about. I've written about this a few times, like my relationship with the canon, but what are books maybe you all associate with it? And part of this is really for people to think about why it matters, and to undo any shame of that. And I mean, I am a literary scholar. I have never read Moby Dick. This is the version I have read. The daughter that read my child's. So if you're not watching, it is the Cozy Classics, Felted Animals, Moby Dick. That's it. I don't feel at fault for not wanting to sit through hundreds of pages about a whale. I get why it's important. I'm glad somebody else wants to study it, but I don't want to read it. And I've made it this far, late stage career, and I've never read it, and I'm fine. Yeah. So that's kind of what we're talking about, is like, what did you read? What didn't you read? What do you feel like you should have read and never read? Yeah. So I'll kind of throw that out to the two of you, and I have a feeling this will become a longer conversation.
Yeah, I think, so often when I think about the canon, I think about like, what did I read in high school, right? Because I mean, even though I was an English major and I have a whole, so to go back a second, when we started talking about the canon on this podcast, I just went through my bookshelves and I looked through like what is on my shelf that would be considered part of the canon. There's not a lot. But there's some, and there was many that stayed there, right? We've had some conversations about Charles Dickens before, but I went and I pulled like a whole big stack of ones that I like totally hated and I never want to see again. And
all right, so for people listening, that's a big stack.
It's a huge stack. It's heavy.
People aren't on YouTube, that's a big stack.
And it will be soon be going to the free libraries around my area. But thinking back to high school, what's interesting is that I returned to reading in high school because of the books we were reading. There were some that I hated, like Animal Farm. I hated it. But as we progressed more, and like Lord of the Flies, loved it. Brave New World, loved it. Right? Like To Kill a Mockingbird. Like I think those were like 8th grade or something. Anyway, when we started those, and Great Expectations, I loved it. But those were ones that I just was like, oh, like I love these stories. Then there was like 1984. Like, I mean, I feel like there's just some in there that brought me back to reading, and really it was Brave New World and Lord of the Flies that really kind of brought me
I really
back.
just really want to quickly say I taught both of those books when I taught high school seniors, and it makes me filled with joy that two books that I love so much did that for you, because that was my hope all the time. I think the work that you can do with Lord of the Flies and Brave New World is brilliant.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's totally random. I was working at a bookstore and there were two young guys, like late teens, early 20s, that were working at the cash register, and they're like, I don't like reading. And I'm like, have you read Brave New World or Lord of the Flies? And they were like, no. And I'm like, you must read those. And they were both like, wow, that, they really connected with it. And this was in the 90s, right? So they didn't read them in school, but obviously it was something that connected with them as well. I think those two really go well with that age.
I loved teaching those back to back. And also they both remain universal. And I should have said that about the canon. Like there's some universal nature to it that it has staying power. Maybe it doesn't deserve it, but that those two books would be canonical, right? Like Lord of the Flies, I've said before, is my favorite book, and people are always astounded by that, but it's because what it did for me. And so that's good, right? That's a good use of the canon, is to get kids to be like, whoa, this still speaks to me.
Yep.
Yeah. Did you have any, Athena, that, you know, you were reading in high school or college that, you know, really resonated with you or that you enjoyed?
I love that we all three of us love both of those. That's very cool. Isn't that great? Well, and I'm afraid I'm going to mess up what's in. I'm, you know me. I'm very honest, everyone, all listeners, about my doubts of myself. I'm afraid I'm going to mess up what's like I consider in the canon.
Well,
Like
that's part of the problem about the canon, right? Is that
there
people
isn't.
have ideas about it, and there is no. I think it was Harold Bloom. I think people have kind of. Like people have tried to maybe articulate it. There are lists. There's all kinds of things, but there is no one answer. So don't fret about that.
Like I love Frankenstein. I don't know if that's considered. I know Colleen hates it.
That is most certainly in the canon.
And that's one of the only women in the canon. Like most of the women that I think would be considered canonical, I'm like, oh god.
Yeah, don't like it.
What do you like about that book? It's so boring.
I don't know. I love the themes in it. I think it's just amazing.
Okay. Well,
I
themes,
love,
yes.
you know what I mean? I love the ideas. I love that whole idea. I think is incredible. Like it gives me goosebumps to think of this like invention of life. I don't know. I love.
I am in the minority for sure.
Yeah.
Even among my colleagues, like that is a very top book. I think there's a lot of cool things that happen with that book. I just, you know what? I didn't read it until I was maybe in my 30s, or I didn't try to read it. And I was like, this is off. I don't want to read this anymore. Yeah. So maybe it would have been different if it had been like earlier on and more of like a revelation for me.
Yep. What about Jane Eyre? Is that canon?
I love that book.
I love that book.
Me too. It's my favorite.
No, I love it.
Have we talked about this? That I found it in the book closet when I taught high school, and I was like, we need to teach a book by a woman. Yeah. This is insanity. And I found a class set of them in the back, and I blew off the dust, and I was like, we are reading Jane Eyre. I love it. And the boys were like, this is a girl book. And I'm like, well, based on that assumption, then every other book you've ever read is a boy book. So maybe we should read this one girl book.
Yeah.
Because it had a girl protagonist.
Right.
So, no, I love Jane Eyre. I think that's just like a great. I wonder if I would still love it if I read it now. But I do love that book.
Me too.
I've returned to it. I've read it a few times, like since like many stages of my life, and I still love it. So good.
Yeah.
I've read several like other books. I think there was a book. Was it called Adele? There was a book maybe called Adele. Is there a character named Adele in Jane Eyre?
Oh,
like a spin-off book, spin-off book. And then Wide Sargasso Sea is kind of a spin-off book of Bertha. I don't really love that book, but I like those other books too that came out of Jane Eyre. Yeah, I had a whole Jane Eyre moment.
Yeah, that's making me think.
But speaking of the Brontes, though.
Oh yes, Liz, please.
Okay.
Wuthering Heights. I'm currently holding up 2 copies. If anyone
never read it, never even tried.
And I had to get 2 copies because the one professor was like, "That's not the version we're using in our book. In our class, you need to get the other one."
It's not translated.
Well, I know, but they're like, "You're gonna have the wrong pages."
Who cares? I can figure it out. Tell me the chapters and stuff.
Right.
Colleen, I know you know that, but this professor was like, "No, you must get." And so I'm like. So now I read it the first time and hated it. And now I have to get a second copy of the book and hate it once again. This book. Yep. And so you haven't read it, Colleen?
Is that the Heathcliff book?
Yes.
No, I'm not. And then it's dark. Everything's dark. Is that what, is it gothic?
Yeah.
Gothic novels. I hate it. I it's not fair because I've never sat and read it, so I should be clear. And that book is called Adele by Emma Tennant, and I remember reading that like 20 years ago, loving it. I don't. What else have the Brontes written? I don't even know. Do you have any other? Is it just Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, the Bronte sisters?
They're the ones that would probably most likely be part of that. There's another one that is it Violetta,
Right.
something like that I just read recently because so can't remember, one of our Lehigh colleagues had posted it and I was like, oh yeah, and no, it was just as torturous. I didn't really like it. Because I feel like I love Jane Eyre, right? And so
Yeah.
you're like, there has to be others. I was like,
I mean, we could talk about several sacred cows. I mean, we could talk about I mean, we're getting close to the end of an episode time already, right? And we barely even started talking about sacred cows. But I mean, I can say I've never tolerated a book by Virginia Woolf. This makes me a bad feminist scholar, except A Room of One's Own, which is an essay. And I despise Jane Austen. I can't stand her writing. It makes me miserable. So like all of these kind of even the few women that are included in the canon, I cannot connect with. It's Jane Eyre is probably about it, because we've all named women, right? Women who are writing within the canon who are already, I have an article that my friend and I wrote like about women in or out of the canon for English Journal, like trying to get students to think about gender and canon, not even race, not even nationality, just gender in the late 1900s.
Right.
And the work that it took to do that and having students go out and find these women. So, but even those women writers, I don't really love, like that just my gender doesn't make me connect with.
Yeah. Curious, Athena, have you read any Woolf or Austen and thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've read Jane Austen. I mean, and a little bit of Virginia Woolf. It's embarrassing. I should have read more, but I have not.
This is the shame. Stop saying that.
I know.
This is exactly the shame that we're unpacking. Like,
yes, I have a lot of shame. And one thing I wanted to say quickly about Wuthering Heights is I read it, and I remember it felt like a slog. And this doesn't kind of count, but I liked Alice Hoffman's interpretation of it here on Earth. I did love that. Isn't that so?
I read that book. I loved that book. Was that I'm looking at the title of the cover to make sure I'm.
Yep.
Pretty sure I read that. That was like in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I think so. Yep. Yeah. That was her interpretation of that. And I loved that, but
1997. Late
oh, wow.
1900s. I loved that book. I don't even think I realized that. I mean, I was 1997.
Yeah, but I thought that was
30 years ago. So maybe I knew and I didn't know.
Yeah, I think when I read Jane Austen, it's like I respect what it is, but it's not something I go back to. Like some people really find it comforting and they return to it again and again. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I do appreciate how some things are so famous from them, like certain sentences, you know what I mean, that we all know that have even been interpreted into other things, like change the language because it's just so iconic. But I don't know, but it's not something I think about a lot. Like I think about Jane Eyre, or I think about Great Expectations, and and Frankenstein. Like there's certain things that hang out in my mind, but those don't as much for me.
There's a whole class that on my campus, a Jane Austen class.
Really? Wow. Yep.
Students love, and I'm like, great. I'm never teaching that.
They do. People really do.
And it's always been taught by men, which I think is awesome. Like I love that.
That's very interesting.
But that's one of we don't have a lot of classes. We don't have a lot of classes centered around our authors. There's like a Tolkien class, a Poe class, and an Austen class.
Wow.
Again, very canonical.
Yeah.
But students take that Austen class and they really like it. And I'm like, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Austen. I love a good Austen, but there's some that I didn't resonate with. I mean, there's a lot out there. I mean, Pride and Prejudice, come on.
Yeah.
But she did Northanger Abbey too, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I love that one. Love that.
Yep.
Persuasion, not so much. Emma, not so much.
Yeah.
Now give me a good 8-hour Pride and Prejudice, Colin Firth, Mr. Darcy. I loved that. I mean, I watched it. I loved that.
And that was fairly true to the book, because
I don't want to sit and read it. I've tried. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
Because I love rereading it and then hearing the voices of like Colin Firth.
Oh. I do love watching it.
And Louisa May Alcott would definitely, if we're talking about women in the canon.
Yeah.
I've never read Little Women, again, sorry.
Yeah.
But I read Work. I love her novel Work. So,
Okay.
but that wouldn't be considered canonical.
Yeah.
So I do think it's interesting when we read books that are not are by an author who's in the canon, but aren't the one book or the two books that we would expect to read.
Yep.
I think that's always interesting work because these people wrote more than one book usually.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's always a great exercise as well, if we're thinking just about the women involved, and these are all white women, right?
Yep.
And not one is American. I'm going back in my brain. Nope. We haven't mentioned anybody from the United States.
Mm-hmm. So, no. And I mean, I think even that, like a lot of them, even the Brontes started with, pen names using male names, right? Like, and you think about like George Eliot, right? Like there's spaces where
I do love George.
Like even in, what was that?
I love George Eliot.
Yeah,
I
me
love
too.
Middlemarch. I love Middlemarch. It's one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is amazing.
But yeah, even then they couldn't even have the opportunity to write under their own names.
Right.
Yeah. So
they were pushing forward. They were pushing things forward, which I.
Yeah. So that's interesting.
I think we have more to say, but probably another whole episode's worth.
We thought we were going to have potentially 2 episodes on the canon, but I think this is a good start on just kind of like grounding ourselves in what the canon is, some of the books that we've read and liked or not liked. But I think so far we've been focused on the women. I think already in the podcast, we've talked about Charles Dickens as well. And so I think we don't have to go into that one, but obviously his books are in the canon. But yeah, we will return in another episode on the canon. But as always, we like to end the podcast with a book recommendation for you. And our rule is it needs to be 2 out of the 3. And so this is one that Colleen and I both finished. And I actually listened to it, so I don't have a physical copy to share with you. So I'll let Colleen introduce our recommendation for this podcast.
So this is called The Lucky Ones by Zara Chowdhary. And just really quickly, I got to meet her. She was very charming, and I was already interested in the story. So it's a memoir of a young teenage girl who was living in India during the Gujarati riots. So that's a region in India where there was a genocide or a pogrom against people who were Muslim. And so it's her perspective of what it was like during that time, 40 days or something to that effect, when the emergency was announced. But also it helps the reader really understand all of that really complicated history, and I think in a really good way. So I think it's one of those books that I feel like people should read, mainly so they understand why it matters that Narendra Modi is the president or the prime minister. I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I'm forgetting the type of government, but of India, and why that matters, because he was the governor or the analog to that in Gujarat at that time. And so I think this is a really brave book. And since I've purchased it and met her, it has been nominated for a PEN Nonfiction Award, I think. And it's just, are you going to flip the pages really fast? No. Are you going to leave it understanding both one young person's kind of coming of age in that moment and some really complex political history of India and how they got to that moment and then how they moved on from it or didn't? Yes. So if this isn't like a yay, go do the summer read, but I think it's worth bringing up as a book people might want to look into. Yeah. What did you think about it?
Yeah, I think the same with that, Colleen. I feel like I learned a lot. Like it's not an area that I know a lot about, so I did learn a lot in that space. But I think she does a really good job of, talking about the moments and the historical moments, but also then her family and what's happening with that and her relationship with her father. And I mean, there's one thing, and again, I listened to it. So for those of you who are interested in this and think that I don't know if I could read it, listening to it is just as good. It's really insightful. But there was this one moment that, and it was towards the end, I believe, that her friend, was like, called her up and said, let's go to the movies. And she's like, what do you mean go to, like, our life, we're like locked down. Like, I'm not going anywhere. And her friend was like, oh, if it's about the money, I'll take care. And she's just like, what? And I think that was like a good way of showing, right? The show don't tell, right? The showing of how we so often don't understand what other people are going through, or what they're like. We're going one way through the world and thinking this is everyone's experience, even friends, right? Like, this was her friend that was like, let's go to the movies, like, not even recognizing her life and how she was experiencing it, and what was going on in that space. And so I thought that was like a really poignant moment that stuck with me, even like days after listening to it.
And in that moment, then Zara hangs up.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, oh, we are never going to, because that friend was Hindu and had no concerns about moving through the world. And meanwhile, people who are Muslim were being slaughtered, murdered, chopped apart in hundreds, thousands, depending on who does the number. And I love that scene, and I really remember it too, because she basically is just like, it's almost like the girl is still talking and she just hangs up the phone. Like, I don't even know where to start to get this girl to understand this.
Yeah.
And she chooses herself in that moment, which I really liked as well. Like, I don't need this. There was a part that just like, I love these lines. Amma is her mother. Amma tells me how at an early age she felt this sense of not belonging to her own mother. And where we come from, mothers are your first nation. A mother is the land your feet take root in. I just loved it. Like, so, because it's about her mother and their bad marriage and how that came to be. And there's a lot, like, when you start to think about all the work she does in these, I don't know, 275 pages, there's a lot that stays with you, I think, after you read this. And it's a little bit of effort. And I think an audiobook is a really good idea if you feel like you're going to get stuck on some of the language as well. I think that's a really, if this is something that feels intimidating, an audiobook is a great. Does she read it? Do you know who read it? I would assume she read it, but
I think she does. Yeah. I know she definitely was the voice of the intro, but okay. I do think she did read it.
Yeah, it would make sense. It's really, I think it's worth looking at. Don't write to us and tell me that it was hard. I'm not saying it's not. It's just, it's a little effort. You got to bring a little effort to the table. It's not unreadable. It's not dense. It's not what, Rebecca, go ahead.
And I was just going to say, and you're reading hard things, right? Like hearing like what happened to people, but it's like, it's real. Like, these are real events. This is what happened. This isn't, horror film. Like, this is what happened. So you're going to have to like work through that and accept that in listening or reading it, that there are some difficult things to read, but it is what actually happened to people.
Yeah, and how lucky we are that she wrote this book, because I think I haven't read much out of this moment. Historically, I know about it, and politically, but I don't know anybody that's helped me really understand what it was like to be stuck in this apartment,
to be in
with
it.
a family, not be able to take her exams that she had been working toward all of her life, basically, not being able to get food. These things are sadly universal. How hatred manifests so quickly and explodes so quickly, and then how a person became the leader of that country, and we have aligned with him under the current administration, and what the problems with that are. So I actually heard her in an interview after I had read it, and she talked about, like, they asked her, like, are you worried about having been so open about Modi? And she was like, listen, I learned at a young age, like, I can't be silent about these things. And she lives here, right? And she went to Iowa. So she's a great writer. Like, she went through the Iowa writers program. And so anyway, That's me saying a
Excellent.
lot about a book that I think it's maybe not a book that would be on people's radar, but I'm really glad I read it. And I'm glad you did too, Rebecca.
I think, and you did, when mentioning the exams, that was the other scene that has stuck with me afterwards, was when the teachers left, the
Eating.
left the room, and then what happened there, and then even like what she was feeling at the end of school and how she normally would react, like that whole scene. Whoa, I'm not going to give it away, but super impactful as well. That has stuck with me well after listening to it.
And what she took away from that.
Yeah, yeah.
But like the lesson she learned from that, I think, and how that impacted her ability to like move forward.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so can you just mention it again? The Lucky Ones. Hold it up one more time.
I'm holding it up, by Zara, Chowdhary, and the cover has like two I'm assuming this is the sisters, right? Kind of hiding behind something because they can't come out.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate you enjoying this podcast with us and talking about the canon, and we'll talk again about it soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.